Well, thanks for having me tonight. I think as many of you know, I have a little bit of a game camera fetish. I'm gonna try to get my screen shared here. There we go. All right, so continuing on the COVID theme. Bob asked me to share some of my 2020 wildlife highlights. And I just want to ask that because this is going to be recorded and I think shared by Stow TV, I just want to ask that the location of the photos and the cameras remain confidential, both for the sake of my cameras and for the sake of the wildlife. So the basic rule is something like don't ask, don't tell. So I just want to say, I think it's a little, probably a bit of an understatement to say that this has been an unusual year. And at the same time, I think it's quite remarkable that despite all the visitors that we've had to town and SCT lands, you know, nature's kind of kept doing what it does. And I know that for many of us, for the last 9 months, you know, the woods and fields have really been the one place in the world where it still feels like things are normal. We are fortunate in Stow to have this network of interconnected lands that really serve as great wildlife habitat. So all of the images that I'm going to show tonight, I think all of them, are taken on land that's protected by the town or by the trust. Most of them from my cameras, but also a few that have been sent to me. So I think of, oops. Okay, this guy I meant to show earlier while I was talking. So he's just washing his hands, washing his hands, washing his hands, kind of the theme for the year. So I think of all of the species that we see regularly in town, people are most surprised to find out that we have river otters in our local waterways. And Elizabeth Brook, Heath End Meadow Brook, and the Aspet River all have otters. Their antics are perhaps the most fun to watch of any of the species we have in Stow. And a good place to see otters in the winter, especially, I'll turn the volume down, is in Fletcher's Pond from Box Mill Road. You can sometimes see them out playing on the ice. So if you want to see otters, that's a good place.
Oh, pretty good.
Another species that I think people are surprised to know how common they are in Stow are bobcat. They're really not seen very often by people as they travel around. You're very lucky if you see a bobcat, but they are regular visitors to the trails and they tend to have kind of established patterns. We see them at night, we see them during the day, and we see a lot of them in the winter. Foxes are also common in Stow, particularly red fox. I don't see a lot of them in the woods where I have my cameras. They tend to be more often in fields, closer to houses, but there are a lot of foxes in Stow. And the fox on the right is actually a gray fox. They are less often seen, and they're the only member of the dog family, the canid family in the United States that actually can climb trees. They very gray in this photo. They actually, because it's a night photo, but they're actually not as gray as they look in the picture. They do have a very characteristic black tail tip though. So if you see that, you know it's a gray fox. And deer are seen all the time on trail cameras. And I know a lot of people kind of think of them as pests, but every now and then I get a shot of a deer on my camera that really reminds me just how beautiful these animals are. This is shot in the winter. And then just recently a big buck that I caught on my trail camera. Looks like it'd be a headache to carry all that stuff around. Perhaps the biggest surprise in Stow this year was the appearance of a black bear. Certainly not the first in Stow, but it is the first in my memory that has stuck around long enough to make me really wonder if it has taken up residence, rather than just kind of being sighted while passing through, as we've seen in past years. We've had bears sighted in Stow on cameras and by people pretty much from May through September that I know of. I haven't heard of anything more recently. And the first signs that there was a bear in the hood were that some of the beehives on the top of the fields were vandalized. And then very quickly afterwards, we started hearing about people who had bent over bird feeder poles, which is kind of classic bear behavior. And with all the trail cameras that people have in the woods, it was inevitable that Mr. Bear would finally get caught on camera. So the couple of bear shots that we caught early on, including a bear actually reaching for a bird feeder in someone's yard. And then I finally did get the bear on one of my cameras. The reports that we've gotten through the summer of bears have kind of been in the area circled in red on the map. Large areas of unfragmented forest habitat. And, you know, this is a combination of trail camera sightings, police reports, bird feeder reports. You know, it seems like this is the area that the bear was hanging out in. So kind of exciting, and it'll be interesting to see whether we keep seeing them. Bears are slowly expanding their range east, so we are likely to see more and more bears in the future in Stow and have to learn how to deal with them. The second thing that was really exciting, especially for me personally, was that for the last 4 years, I've been watching a pack of coyotes in Stow. And this year they gave birth to a huge litter of 8 pups. Much later in the season that is typical, and a larger litter than is typical. These are the alpha male and alpha female of the pack. Coyotes do mate for life, and the male plays an important role in puppy rearing. And these are the 8 pups tearing down a hill. I think one of the things that I enjoy most about trail cameras is that they help answer the question, not just what's out there, but what are they doing out there? And I had a camera positioned near the den site, and I left that actually intended for months, and ended up getting more than about 5,000 photos of all of the pups during their first couple of months out of the den, playing with each other, interacting with the adults, being fed. It was just really delightful to see all the, what looks like dog puppy behavior from all of them, and also interacting with the adults in some just really sweet ways. So kind of a rare chance to observe all of that interaction and behavior in the woods. And that ultimately led me to have the opportunity to actually creep close to the den site early one morning and get a photo of one of the puppies just coming out of the den. Rather unusual face on this guy. This is my last coyote image. And when I first saw it, I thought the coyote was howling. I've only seen that on the camera one other time. And that was when a coyote was sniffing a freshly left bobcat trail and just kind of threw back his head and started to howl. But this coyote actually may not have been howling, because the camera shows us that right before this picture was taken, this guy was sleeping on the trail, or dozing. So I suspect this is actually a big post-slumber yawn, which is kind of cool to see. And when you put out trail cameras, you never know what you're going to get. So I got the kind of a potpourri of birds this year. A black-crowned night heron juvenile on the left. I've gotten a couple of great blue herons. All of them is about as tall as a coyote in the camera. And then the owl on the right is actually swooping down to grab a snake, and then kind of just tumbles as he lands and grabs the snake. So those were cool to see. And then last but not least is this turkey, who probably can't read, but may have been puzzled about how the chicken crossed the road ahead of him, given that the road. And that's it for me. So I will.
Kathy, that was terrific. Let's give Kathy a hand.
And I'm gonna make.
That was excellent.
Thanks. I'm gonna make Nick the host now. He probably has even better pictures than I do, because he spends hours lying on frozen ground getting them.
So just a minute on This will be kind of fun. So I had the pleasure of coaching Nick Tepper in youth hockey for years, and watched him become a very good hockey player. And what was even more fun was seeing him arrive at Mass Audubon, where I work, as a Terror Corps member of the Mass Audubon staff last year, and watching the great work that he did, and watching literally all of my colleagues say, "Do you believe this guy? How good he is!" And he's a University of Vermont grad, and very, very talented naturalist. And we're really glad to have you here tonight, Nick, and welcome you to present your wildlife images or videos in and around Stow. Nick Tepper.
Cool. So I'm host now.
You should be.
I think so.
Sweet. Cool. Hi, so I'm Nick Tepper. Thanks so much for having me. I grew up in Stow, went to school in Vermont, like Bob said, and now I live in Maynard. As Kathy also said, I spend a lot of time crawling through the woods with a big camera. I'm obsessed with photos and recordings, very obsessed with birds. And if you ever talk to me outside, I can't pay attention because I hear things too much. So here, I'm gonna share my screen here and start my presentation. So Kathy, I knew was gonna kill it with trail cam photos, and I also have a trail cam fetish. Though I'm not as prudent, I leave them in the woods too much and forget to get them and forget where they are all the time. But I do carry around my big camera and have that constantly. So I'm going to start it off with a red fox, which Kathy already mentioned is very common in Stow. So each one of my photos, I'll have a little story I'll tell you about it, and some facts about the animal as well. So this is a beautiful male red fox in early spring. His wife is probably denned up in the woods somewhere with a bunch of babies. And this guy was running at my parents' bird feeders every morning at around 6 a.m. sunrise and terrorizing the squirrels. And he was doing such a good job that he was really cleaning out the squirrels. He would do a little celebration whenever he caught one. And we really appreciated it because he took away the squirrels so that we could get some cool birds. This was one of them that we got. This is called an evening grosbeak. I had personally never seen one until 2 years ago. It's a really special bird that breeds in boreal Canada, way up past any people, almost near Greenland. And these guys haven't really come down to Stow since the 1990s. And now we have this huge spruce budworm breakout in the boreal forest. So there isn't as much food for them up there. So in the winter, they have to come all the way down and just absolutely gorge themselves on all of the bird seed they can. So this photo is also just a little announcement to keep your eyes out. They're in Stow right now. I've seen them and they're just absolutely gorgeous. So see them while they're around. This is without a doubt my favorite animal in Stow. This is a great horned owl, and it's also my favorite sound that I've ever heard. I don't think I'll beat it. This is a beautiful female great horned owl. And I actually found her because I heard her children first, who were begging for all sorts of food, as they do in the summer. They're really, really, really greedy, and they're pretty big and they need to eat a lot. So they're loud. And I heard them, so I started army crawling through the forest for about an hour until I looked up and I saw her. She had swooped in and was just watching me from 10 feet away on a branch. I was ecstatic, and she didn't see me as a threat, and I got to see her watch her feed her nestlings in front of me. And then she did this, which is the coolest part. It was an 85-degree day, and she flew down and landed on a submerged log in the middle of this little pond. And what these birds do is they can dilate the blood vessels on their legs, and then when they dip them in the water, the water carries away all the heat, so they can cool down that way, which is really cool. And it's also really risky because one of the issues of owls having silent flight is they can't waterproof their own feathers. So if she hit the water wrong, she would probably drown. So it's pretty cool to see that she's confident enough in herself after 10 to 30 years of living in Stow that she can land on a submerged log and cool off. So with the Great Horn started a bit of an owl trifecta. I love owls, and I'm usually up at all hours of the night finding them, but sometimes I find them in the day too. I ran into this barred owl in the Ascot Wildlife Refuge and proceeded my army crawl through the woods as I do to get closer and to watch her while she was sleeping and get a couple photos. And the coolest part of this picture is the red squirrel in the upper right corner of this photo, who is absolutely terrified because she climbed the wrong tree. The owl had its eyes closed, heard the squirrel, opened one eye, was watching the squirrel. In this photo, has both eyes open and is definitely watching the squirrel, but trying not to move. And a couple seconds after this, she actually dove for the squirrel. And fortunately for the squirrel, she missed, but really cool experience. And the look of terror in that squirrel's eye is fantastic, I think.
It's a beautiful bird.
So this is the smallest resident species of owl in Stow, and also the least common. This is an eastern screech owl. They come in red morphs and gray morphs. This is a red morph, of course, and just absolutely beautiful. He's peeking his head out of this little hole, which is actually a nest box I put up. And I'd been walking down the trail with my friend and was just cursing where I had put this nest box. It hadn't worked out for a year or so, and I was about to move it. I was thinking about climbing the tree to get it on that day, and I looked up, and little owl was looking down at me. And hopefully, this was a couple weeks ago, so hopefully this year he picks this box to have some babies in, and they hang out in the backyard. So this is a photo actually from Hale Corzine, one of your properties. And this is a spotted salamander, a beautiful migratory species, super common in Stow, but every time you see one, you're kind of taken aback. The easiest time of year to see them is when this was taken, which is late April. It basically happens right after the snow melts. On the first rainy nights, the spotted salamanders and other amphibians will migrate down from hills, like the big hill on Hale Corzine, down to the vernal pools to breed. And catching one in the forest as it was walking down that half a mile down to the vernal pool is really cool. It's always special to see one. Even more special is the blue spotted salamanders that we have in Stow. It's a state listed species, exceedingly rare, incredibly hard to find in Massachusetts, but in Stow, it's less hard. I know a couple of spots for these guys in Stow, and they're just fantastic. It's really cool to photograph an animal that most people have never seen in their whole life. So just wanted to show this little guy and show you guys that you're protecting land that harbors not only the common stuff, but also some pretty spectacular animals. Now we're on to my second favorite Stow resident, which is the Fisher. Kathy didn't show one of these, which we must have been on the same wavelength, but she definitely gets them on her trail cams all the time. They're super common in Stow. They love our big cathedral white pines, and they're just fantastic little weasels. A lot of people think they're vicious and they get kind of a bad rap. And it's true, they are probably the most fearless animal in Stow, but they're just adorable when you see them. They flop around like ferrets. And this guy, speaking of fearless, was completely fearless of me when I ran into him last April, just running around chasing squirrels and could not care less that I was there. This is a big male. The males have the big boxy head, and their skull shape is actually different from the females. And the females are a bit more slender and smaller. They look a little more like minks. Something I want to share about Fishers, which is just a pet peeve of mine, is that a lot of people say that they scream in the midst of the night, and that's actually false. It's a myth, almost an urban legend. It's almost always a red fox making that terrible scream that wakes you up in mid-April or even into March. And finally, I wanted to end on a pretty special species that I've been trying to confirm breeding in Stow for 10 or maybe even 15 years. Bald eagles are somewhat common in Stow during the winter, but they don't often stick around into May and June and July. And this year, a pair did up near where Stow borders Hudson. And I had a hunch, so I kayaked up there about a mile upriver and then hauled over a couple beaver dams and then weaseled my way into a couple other marshes and finally got out to the spot where I was able to find the female bald eagle. And then finally I found her mate when she switched onto the nest. The nest itself was about 3.5 or 4 feet wide, huge nest, right up in a beautiful white pine. And it was just spectacular to find them nesting up there. They weren't successful in raising young this year. They're both 4th-year eagles, so they're very inexperienced. It takes a bald eagle 5 years to hit real maturity. So these guys were a bit premature, but I did drive past just 2 days ago and I saw the female sitting on the same tree. So I think they're going to try it again next year, and fingers crossed that it all happens. So I wanted to keep it short. I know Bob wanted to keep this to an hour, but thanks so much for letting me talk and throwing some of my pictures at you guys. Yeah,
Nick,
thank you.
Nick, that was fantastic. And Kathy as well. Really terrific. Let's have a hand for both of them.
Let's see. How do I stop?
Oh, great.
And so why don't we just say, if anybody has any questions for either Nick or Kathy, unmute yourself, ask the question, and we'll do a few of those. And any questions for either Nick or Kathy? Perhaps not. So again, I will just say those were both terrific presentations, and hopefully it underscored the importance of conservation, and also underscores what a special place Stow is. You know, we're 23 miles as the crow flies from the Boston Common, and we've had moose come through here. We have bears. it's really pretty incredible. I brag about it all the time at work. What a great place that I get to live in. And part of it is that the community is so conservation minded and has supported conservation for as long as they have, and have so many thoughtful landowners who do good things on their own property. All of that adds up. Doing a lot of supporting conservation, both publicly and privately in town. Lucky enough to have a U.S. National Wildlife Refuge in town. Lucky enough to have a beautiful lake and a beautiful river flowing through the community. We're very, very fortunate, and the people that are on this call today are the ones who support it and help make it happen. So I want to finish just by thanking everyone for supporting the trust, and for tuning in tonight, and for spending some time together. And so let's continue, get some good conservation done in the year ahead, that we can talk about it next year. Thank you all, and be well. Bye.